Right, so as much as Labour will be celebrating winning seats across the country, though in actuality it would be more accurate to say the Tories lost them, that wasn't to say Labour didn't get handed their backsides in numerous other seats, and indeed the handful of independent candidates elected across England, 5 of them, won their seats at Labour's expense, and it is perhaps no coincidence all of them stood, although not necessarily exclusively so, on pro-Palestine platforms. It shows that although Labour figures apparently believe the furore over Gaza would die down, it does not. It is an issue that is not going to go away, and being as pro-Israel as Keir Starmer is, and so many other Labour figures are known to be, especially those belonging to Labour Friends of Israel at that, it is arguably going to be an issue Labour will be pushed hard on. Where Labour figures and Tory supporters may not care so much about the issue of Gaza and the Tories could largely get away with much criticism internally, Labour does not have that luxury. They will be held more accountable, and with a potential Gaza Bloc of pro-Palestine MPs able to freely hold Starmer to account on these issues, expect them to do exactly that. Right, so with the election of what can ostensibly be described as a Gaza Bloc of MPs, so certainly at local level there will be other issues they will be dealing with as well, and raising them in Parliament too. The wins for Jeremy Corbyn, of course, the best known, and hardly one I need to go into detail of, given the coverage elsewhere of his win, but also for Ayub Khan, Shaukat Adam, Adnan Hussain and Iqbal Mohammed, ensuring that this is a topic that will never go ignored for long in Parliament, and difficult questions for Starmer, should he continue ardently supporting Israel no matter what they do, will be the very least he deserves to receive. It isn't even just the matter of raising these issues around that have solely seen, certainly some of these candidates elected, but the attitudes, the allegiances, the commentary from some Labour MPs that they were stood against, exposed not just Labour indifference towards Gaza, but demonstrating that hierarchy of racism that's been flagged up for so long in the Labour Party under Starmer, very much still at work too. The 2 examples of this that stood out above all others, and I've covered both of these incidences in detail in other videos specifically about them, I have no doubt helped elect Shaukat Adam and Ayub Khan. Independent campaigns suffer greatly from lack of resources, lack of campaigners, lack of media attention. This is why independents have always struggled at parliamentary level to get elected. And the 2 incumbent MPs that got deservedly dumped out of their jobs, despite Labour winning a landslide, exemplify the success the independents have had, and on this issue of Israel and Gaza. Shaukat Adam is now the new MP for Leicester South, a hugely diverse community where in 2019 the incumbent Labour MP Jonathan Ashworth won 67% of the local vote. Yet his ridiculous antics of fleeing from constituents wanting to question him about his party and his position on Gaza notably, footage of which saw him on the phone claiming to be being bullied and harassed and begging people to not let such people win. And then there was his racist language concerning Bangladeshi migrants in particular, echoing what his boss Keir Starmer had said as well, saw him deservedly sacked by his constituents and replaced by Adam, a local optician, for whom the Labour position on Gaza was what prompted him to stand against Labour, and why in his victory speech he held up a keffiyeh and told those assembled that this was for Gaza. In an interview, Adam made it clear that he was doing this to hold whoever was in power or would be in power to account, but more so if that is Labour, because the area has historically given Labour their vote. But for what in return? As much as Gaza is not a uniquely Muslim issue, the Palestinian people being Muslim themselves for the most part means it's easy to think in those terms in that way. But there's no getting away from the fact also that in a constituency that is 1/3 Muslim, this was going to be an issue significant enough to have a real impact. That hasn't stopped some mainstream outlets, the Guardian notably, I'll accuse of this, painting Ashworth as a victim of Labour's complacency over Gaza. Ashworth was one of the leading voices causing offence. He was no damn victim here. The victims are in Gaza, and he's been replaced by a guy who will keep pointing that point out in Parliament. Similarly, Ayub Khan overturned the 15,317 vote majority of Khalid Mahmood in Birmingham Perry Barr to be elected as their new MP, following footage of Mahmood, himself Muslim, berating other Muslims as illiterate for not understanding Labour's position on the matter of Gaza. Khan is interesting though. He's a barrister by trade and indeed had been a Liberal Democrat for many years. He'd actually been elected as a Lib Dem councillor in 2003 and only resigned as a Lib Dem in May, so that he could fight this general election as an independent instead, choosing to do so after his party had allegedly told him to hush up about his concerns over the Gaza war, now in its 10th month. And that really does say a lot about the Liberal Democrats' position on Gaza, if true. Birmingham Labour MPs have all seen, in spite of Labour landslide, or their electoral landslide, their majority slashed though. Jess Phillips's majority in Yardley cut from more than 10,000 to less than 700, so nearly beaten herself. And Shabana Mahmood in Ladywood's majority was cut from over 28,000 to less than 3,500. And similar has happened to the Labour MPs too in other parts of the country. So for anyone lauding the Labour majority in Parliament right now, asking why so many Labour MPs saw their majorities drop instead of grow, and asking why the number of votes cast for Labour in 2024 was actually lower than they got in 2019, which was supposedly the worst election for Labour since 1935, they're questions that can legitimately be aimed at Labour now. The Tories lost this election. Labour have benefited from their loss rather than won anything themselves. Gaza, though certainly not the only issue, did play a not insignificant part in this picture. More so in some parts of the country than others, certainly. But if you're still saying, why should we in the UK care about Gaza, just because you, as an individual, might not? Well, a lot of people do, and you have to accept that. Maybe you should reflect on your own sociopathic attitudes, frankly, especially if you remain unmoved by so much of the imagery that has been on social media for months now. But Labour absolutely should be in a reflective mood too. Where Shaukat Adam and Ayub Khan gained media attention in some part because they took out relatively high-profile and prominent Labour MPs, this wasn't so much the case with Adnan Hussain and Iqbal Mohammed. Hussain is a solicitor from Blackburn who snatched the win by 132 votes over Labour incumbent Kate Hollern, who was defending a majority of over 18,000. Again, Gaza was the key issue here, and like John Ashworth and Leicester South, that constituency is roughly one-third Muslim as well. But again, I have to keep pointing it out, and I feel I have to keep pointing it out because the mainstream media insist on reflecting this on Muslim communities, that this matter of Israel and Gaza is not a uniquely Muslim issue. Labour should also reflect on the impact that turnout had here, because turnout in Blackburn dropped from 61.8% in 2019 to just 53.1%. Nearly half the voting public in that constituency didn't bother to vote at all. And that is a bigger issue than just Gaza alone. That is a direct reflection on Starmer not being seen as any kind of change or alternative to the Tories we've only just got rid of. And with only 132 votes in it, that clearly could well have been a deciding factor in Labour losing a seat they've held since 1955. And the former seat of such Labour figures as Jack Straw and Barbara Castle. Iqbal Mohammed is an IT consultant and engineer by trade. He was standing in a new constituency, though. This is all brand new, no historical precedent. However, the new constituency was Dewsbury and Batley, comprised parts of the former Labour-held constituencies of Batley and Spen and Huddersfield, and part of the, at last election anyway, there has been Labour-held in the past, but last election was Tory-held Dewsbury. Standing for Labour here was a former aide to Rachel Reeves, of all people, Heather Iqbal, but she was soundly beaten into second place as Iqbal Mohammed took the seat with a majority of nearly 7,000, an independent with a majority of nearly 7,000. He stood on a platform of, yes, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the atrocities there, but he was also campaigning on the cost of living crisis in the UK, which Labour, especially when you come back to that two-child benefit cap, has caused so much harm and driven so much anger and resulted in part as well to voter apathy towards Labour because they're no different to what the Tories were putting on offer. That a seat that should have been an easy Labour win according to polling turned out to be anything but, and is now a fairly safe independent hold going forwards. And if Labour don't deliver on change, as they stood on a slogan of, then they will be punished heavily come the next election, and they will deserve it, given their majority is built on good fortune rather than sound foundation and voter support. My fear is it won't happen though. And you only need to look at others that Starmer has imposed, though not necessarily successfully, to see that. Luke Akehurst is a prime example, and now unfortunately a Labour MP, a literal Israel lobbyist. That is somebody who will never vote in Palestine's interests and against Israel. He has a near 6,000 vote majority now in North Durham. But again, a reduced turnout of 57%, which is down nearly 9% on 2019. Labour tried to impose one of Akehurst's pro-Israel lackeys, Sharma Tatler, into Chingford and Woodford Green, replacing Faiza Shaheen while she was literally out campaigning for Labour. And so nobody can blame her for standing as an independent, given all the work she had herself done in the constituency for the Labour Party continually since the last election. But that vote split meant the Tory incumbent Ian Duncan-Smith kept his seat again. What Starmer's actions and attitudes on Gaza and Israel have shown, along with those loyalists, some of whom survived with reduced majorities, some of whom have lost their seats, is the creation of what is being referred to now as a Gaza Bloc in Parliament, for whom as much as Labour may continue, or who may increase their vocal support for Israel in government now as they are, they will have this group for the next 5 years that will oppose them on this all the way, elected on mandates to do exactly that in whole or in part, and certainly will on other issues too. But the matter of Gaza has a stronger voice now than it did in the last Parliament, and Labour can choose to be a party that listens or shows it doesn't care. If it is the latter, the damage such an attitude has already caused will only grow, and even as we all hope the genocide in Gaza ends soon, the Israeli occupation likely won't. And therefore this is a matter not going away for Starmer and Labour anytime soon. Of course, it isn't just seats Labour have lost over its handling of Gaza, it is members and councillors that they've lost as well. I think next year's local elections, with Labour having been in power for the better part of a year by that point, could be rather illustrative, shall we say, not just with rises in independence, but as a recent defection showed, the Green Party continuing to build a presence as well. Get the details of that Labour defection to the Greens in this video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.